Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning and you're standing at the gas pump. You slide the card in. You wait. And somewhere in the back of your brain, a little calculator starts running automatically. How much is left in the account? What comes out Friday? Whether you can fill it all the way up or just put in 30 and hope for the best. You've been doing this math so long you don't even notice you're doing it anymore. Then one day, years from now, you pull up to that same pump. You slide the card in. You fill it all the way up. And you realize you didn't do the math. Not because you got rich. Not because anything dramatic happened. Something just quietly shifted. Here's what nobody tells you about building wealth. It doesn't feel better gradually. It feels the same, and then one day it just doesn't. There are 3 moments where that happens. 3 specific points where the ground underneath you actually shifts. And if you don't know where they are, you can spend years grinding, earning more every single year, and still feel exactly as stuck as the day you started. My name is Michael, and I study the gap between how much people earn and how free they actually feel. Today we're mapping the 3 exact net worth levels where life starts feeling different. And I'll warn you right now, the 3rd one is going to break something you've believed your whole life. Stay with me, because the level that actually matters isn't the one with the biggest number on it. But before we get there, let me make this real. Because numbers on their own don't mean anything. People do. So meet Marcus. Marcus isn't real. But you've met him. Maybe you've been him. Maybe you are him right now. A few years ago, Marcus was 31 years old, making $54,000 a year, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with a car that needed new tires he kept putting off. On paper, Marcus was fine. Job, car, apartment. Functioning adult. In reality, Marcus was running a silent background program in his head 24 hours a day. A constant low-level hum of what's in the account, what's coming out, what happens if the car breaks down before the next paycheck. He wasn't drowning, but he wasn't breathing either. And that's exactly where we start. Level 1. The breathing line. Here's a Wednesday in Marcus's life at 54,000. He wakes up before his alarm because his brain doesn't sleep the way it used to. He checks his phone not for messages, for the banking app. He skips breakfast at home and grabs something cheap on the way in. At lunch, he gets a text from his dentist reminding him he's 6 months overdue. He closes it without reading it. At 3 in the afternoon, his check engine light comes on and his stomach drops. That evening, he sits on his couch doing math that won't solve anything. Now, that's not a discipline problem. That's not a budgeting problem. That is the weight of financial uncertainty sitting on your chest every single day. And here's the thing that should genuinely stop you cold. Most of America lives exactly there. The Federal Reserve runs a survey every few years asking Americans about their financial lives. And what they keep finding is staggering. Only about 63% of American adults say they could cover an unexpected $400 expense using cash or a credit card they'd pay off immediately. 1 in 8, roughly 13%, say they couldn't cover a $400 emergency by any means at all. Not cash, not a card, not borrowing from a friend. For $100. Car battery. An emergency vet visit. The thing the universe throws at you on a random Tuesday. And it makes sense when you see the other number. The median savings account balance in America sits somewhere around $8,000. Not the rich people dragging the average up. The actual middle. $8,000 standing between a regular household and total chaos. Meanwhile, about 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now, at the single wealthiest moment in recorded human history. So what does level 1 actually mean? Level 1 is the breathing line. It's the point where financial survival stops being your full-time job. For a single person in a mid-cost city, that line sits somewhere around $50,000 to $75,000 in net worth. Not income, net worth. Savings minus debt minus what you owe. The actual number left standing if you cleared everything today. For a family of 4, that line climbs to around $100,000 to $150,000. And crossing it doesn't make you rich. It doesn't even make you comfortable. It just makes one specific thing stop. The math. Watch what happens when Marcus finally gets there. He doesn't get a raise that changes his life overnight. He gets a couple of raises over 3 years, pays down some debt, stops adding to it, and builds a small pile of savings that exists for exactly one purpose: absorbing whatever the universe throws at him. The check engine light comes on, and instead of the stomach drop, there's just a sigh. He books the appointment. It costs $340. His savings account doesn't notice. The dentist reminder comes in. He books it. His friend asks if he wants to go camping next month. He says yes without doing math first. That is the entire prize at level 1. Not a vacation, not a new car. Just the ability to say yes to a $200 camping trip without feeling it for 3 weeks. And if that sounds small, yeah, it is. But for 2/3 of this country, it is the single most life-changing financial shift they will ever make. Because everything above it gets easier, and everything below it is exhausting in a way that never fully goes away. Here's the trap though, the one nobody warns Marcus about. The moment he crosses the breathing line, everything starts costing more. His landlord raises the rent because the lease is up. His health insurance premium creeps up at renewal. The car that needed tires now also needs brakes. Inflation doesn't care that Marcus just got comfortable. It just keeps running. The Federal Reserve found that to afford a median-priced home in 2026, a household needs to earn roughly $110,000 per year. And even then, housing costs eat almost 45% of income. The 30% rule everyone quotes? It applies to fewer and fewer American cities every single year. So the breathing line is real. Crossing it is worth everything you've got. But the moment you get there, the next wall is already visible on the horizon. And that wall is level 2. Level 2. When the decision tax disappears. You've probably heard the number. $75,000 a year. That's where money stops making you happier. It came from a real study, 2 serious researchers, Kahneman and Deaton, back in 2010, who found that day-to-day emotional well-being climbed with income up to about $75,000 a year, then basically flatlined. The internet printed it on 1,000 motivational posts and stopped reading. Then in 2021, a researcher named Killingsworth came along with better tools, an app that pinged people in real time to ask how they actually felt in the moment, and found no plateau at all. Happiness just kept rising with income. No cliff, no flatline. 2 famous studies. Opposite answers. So in 2023, they did the thing adults almost never do. They collaborated. And the answer turned out to be more interesting than either one alone. For most people, money does keep buying happiness well past $75,000. But for a specific group, people carrying pain that has nothing to do with money, grief, loneliness, loss, the relationship breaks down around $100,000. More money stops helping because money was never the problem to begin with. And that original $75,000, adjusted for inflation today, it sits closer to $110,000. The finish line didn't disappear. It just grew up and moved. And that is exactly where Marcus is heading. He grinds. He earns more. He gets smarter about the gap between what he earns and what he spends. He works his way to $280,000 in net worth, a combination of home equity, retirement accounts, and real savings. He's not wealthy by any stretch, but something shifts. I call this one the decision tax. At level 1, you pay this tax constantly. Every small purchase runs through a quick internal approval process. Groceries or the dentist. New tires or save the money. The coffee you actually want or the one you can justify. Hundreds of tiny decisions every single week, all carrying that same quiet weight. Can I actually afford this? At level 2, somewhere around $250,000 to $500,000 in net worth, that tax just evaporates. You go to the dentist. You don't hold a small internal meeting about it first. The dishwasher breaks. It's a phone call, not a crisis. Your sister invites you to her birthday dinner at a nice restaurant. You go. You don't calculate your portion before you sit down. That's it. That's the whole prize at level 2. You stop negotiating with yourself at every single checkout. Not because you're wealthy, because the constant low-level mental drain of 1,000 small financial decisions just stops. And unbothered is wildly, criminally underrated. Here's the data that puts a real number on it. When Bankrate surveyed Americans about financial security, 45% said they need a 6-figure income just to feel comfortable. When Empower asked what salary would make people feel genuinely happy, The average answer came back at around $284,000 per year, which mostly just proves that the finish line always sits a comfortable 2 to 3 times beyond wherever we happen to be standing. But the feeling people are actually reaching for, the one hiding behind those numbers, it's not I have more. It's I don't have to think about it so much. That is level 2. And it frees up something more valuable than money. It frees up mental space. The hours you spent lying awake running numbers that never solved anything. The headspace that quietly comes back to you. Marcus notices it in a strange way first. He sits down to read on a Sunday morning and realizes he hasn't thought about money once that entire weekend. Not because he forgot. Because there was nothing to worry about. Everything was fine. He just got his Sunday back. But here's the ambush waiting at level 2. And it's the same trap, just running faster. Childcare for one kid averages over $13,000 a year nationally. 2 kids, you're approaching $28,000. A second mortgage that happens to wear tiny shoes. Family health insurance now runs close to $27,000 per year in total premiums. Even with an employer covering most of it, a family is personally handing over nearly $7,000 out of pocket. And gross income is a fantasy number. Nobody actually lives on their salary. They live on whatever is left after the government takes its cut. A $120,000 job in a no-income tax state takes home roughly $88,000 after federal taxes and payroll. In California or New York, knock off several thousand more. So when someone hits level 2 and still feels stretched, they are not bad with money. The price of admission to a normal middle-class life quietly doubled in the last 5 years. Nobody bothered to reprint the brochure. Which brings us to the level almost nobody actually reaches. And the one that honestly changed how I think about every single financial decision I make. Level 3. When work becomes optional. Let's talk about a number. Not an income number. A net worth number. To crack the top 10% of American households by net worth in 2025, you need somewhere around $1.8 million. Top 5% closer to $3.5 million. And the top 1% doesn't even begin until above 13 million. These are not Doctor with a Nice House numbers. This is a completely different financial universe with its own rules. But here's what took me embarrassingly long to understand. Level 3 has almost nothing to do with income. It's about assets. The difference between someone earning $300,000 a year and someone who is actually free isn't the salary. It's whether their money makes money while they sleep. Whether the portfolio, the investments, the assets are generating income on their own without that person showing up anywhere. This is where the 4% rule comes in. Back in 1994, a financial planner named William Benjen ran the numbers and found something remarkable. If you have a large enough pile of invested assets, you can withdraw about 4% of it every single year, basically forever, without running out of money. The market grows. You take your 4%. The pile stays roughly intact. A study out of Trinity University later backed this up. And it gave us what's now called the Rule of 25. You need approximately 25 times your annual spending, invested, to be financially independent. If your life costs $60,000 a year, you need $1.5 million invested. If your life costs $80,000, you need $2 million. If your life costs $100,000, you need $2.5 million. At that point, your money generates your paycheck. You don't. Some researchers now argue the safe rate is closer to 3.3%, which pushes the number higher. But the exact decimal isn't the point. The point is there is a number, and it's built entirely out of assets, not salary. And here is why this matters so much, and why it quietly explains why the wealthy keep pulling further ahead while everyone else runs harder. The wealthiest 10% of American households own more than 87% of all the stocks in this country. Over the last 5 years, the stock market climbed roughly 109%. The median home went up around 25%. So if your money was sitting in a savings account, you got the 25% world at best. If your money was invested and working for you, you got the 109% world. Same 5 years. Completely different planet. That's not a conspiracy. It's just what happens when your money has a full-time job and you're not the only one in the household earning. Watch what this does to Marcus. He hits his level 2 number. Then he keeps going. He keeps the gap between income and spending wide. He keeps investing automatically without touching it. The portfolio grows. The compound interest that felt invisible at 50,000 starts becoming visible at 500,000. At 800,000 invested, the portfolio is generating, at 7% average annual return, about $56,000 per year in growth. Marcus is making more money while asleep than some of his coworkers make showing up every single day. At 1.2 million, he could pull 48,000 per year out of the portfolio and it would sustain itself indefinitely. Work is no longer mandatory, not in the sense that he quits tomorrow, but in the sense that the next paycheck is no longer about survival. He works because he chooses to, and that is a completely different relationship with a Monday morning. Now here's the part one promised would break something. Once you're past level 3, once work is genuinely optional, money basically stops reducing your stress. Think about it carefully. At level 1, you killed the fear of the $400 emergency. At level 2, you killed the decision tax. At level 3, you killed the paycheck dependency. There is no level 4 fear left for money to slay. So what does extra money actually buy after this point? Time. A 2017 study found that people who spend money to buy back their own hours, paying someone to handle the things they hate, end up measurably happier. Not because they're wealthy, because they bought back a Tuesday afternoon that used to belong to someone else. That's the whole game at level 3. Not a yacht, not a mansion. The ability to be sitting at your kitchen table on a Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon, working on something you actually care about because you want to, not because the mortgage is due on Friday. Rich is a number. Wealthy is a Tuesday afternoon that nobody owns but you. Now I know the objection forming right now, because I hear it every time. But I know people pulling 200,000 a year who are completely stressed out. And I know people on 70,000 who seem totally at peace. So what's going on? Here's the uncomfortable proof. About 44% of people earning over 100,000 a year still live paycheck to paycheck. There's even data suggesting around 40% of people making over 500,000 a year feel like they can't get ahead. $500,000. Feeling stuck. 2 words explain this. Lifestyle creep. Every time income climbs, necessities mysteriously expand to match it. The raise becomes a lease payment on something nicer. The bonus becomes a renovation. The promotion becomes private school tuition. Luxuries quietly reclassify themselves as requirements, until you're earning 3 times what you used to and feeling exactly as squeezed as the day you started. Which means the real variable across all 3 of these levels was never the income. It was the gap, the space between what you earn and what you spend. A disciplined household at 70,000 keeping that gap wide can genuinely feel more free than a chaotic one at 250,000 drowning in monthly commitments. And here's the part that surprised me most. When researchers ask people what actually makes them feel financially secure, not the theoretical perfect number, but the real lived feeling, the top answers aren't some giant net worth figure. They're paying bills on time and being debt-free. Control. That's what every single level is actually buying. Not stuff. Control. And the beautiful thing about control is this: you don't have to wait for a certain number to start building it. You can start today with exactly what you have by protecting the gap. So let me give you the map before we close. Level 1, the breathing line, is crossed when you have 3 to 6 months of expenses fully liquid, no high-interest debt, and a small emergency fund that makes a $400 surprise annoying instead of catastrophic. It's not about hitting a specific number. It's about the math stopping. Level 2, the decision tax gone, is crossed when your net worth sits around 2 to 4 times your annual spending, your retirement accounts are growing automatically, and you stop running internal approval processes before small purchases. You still think about money. You just stop worrying about it at 3 in the morning. Level 3, work optional, is crossed when your invested assets reach 25 times your annual spending. At that point, the portfolio can sustain your life indefinitely. You work by choice, not by necessity. Most people watching this right now are somewhere between level 1 and level 2. And that's exactly where the work matters most. Because the gap you protect today is the gap that builds level 3. Picture Marcus one last time. Same gas pump. Same Tuesday morning. Different year. He slides the card in. He fills it all the way up. He gets back in the car. And somewhere on the drive, He realizes he didn't do the math, didn't check the balance, didn't feel that quiet hum of financial anxiety that used to follow him everywhere he went. Nothing dramatic happened. No lottery ticket, no windfall, no single moment that changed everything overnight. Just years of protecting a gap, building slowly, letting the machine run quietly in the background. And then one Tuesday, the math just went quiet. That quiet is the whole prize. Not the car, not the house, not the number on the statement. The silence where the fear used to live. First you stop drowning. Then the decisions stop draining you. Then, if you guard that gap patiently enough, your money starts buying back your afternoons one by one. That's the level worth chasing. Not the one with the biggest number on it. The one where the only math you've got left is figuring out how you actually want to spend a Wednesday. If this changed the way you think about where you are right now, leave a comment and tell me, which of these 3 levels are you at? And which part surprised you most? I read every single one. See you in the next one.